U3 WTJ AA4SL.
Roger, Roger, there's the same factor is present here also, and this pandemic is largely affected the general practice, and it also affect the psychology of the people. So yes, that is a totally shifting in the treatment paradigm here. It is observed here right now. Back to you, Alpha Alpha for Foxtrot Lima. This is VU3 Whiskey Tango Japan.
Thank you, Sir Sando. And by the way, for all of you, I'm practicing for tomorrow. I have working, this is on my laptop here, NetLogger and the IM of NetLogger and BlueDV. But on my two screens from my other computer, my desktop, I've got the Marco conversations up and running just to monitor anything that comes in, and also my Gmail if anyone has questions. So I anticipate tomorrow would be more of that type of activity. But today, at least, we're getting practice. I don't even have an HF radio really hooked up right now. I got to hook up a linear later today. I haven't been on the air in a few months, probably 2 or 3 months, except for 6 meters. Hey, here's where I saw any other early check-ins for the Marco DV net. Okay, none other heard. So if you get a chance to go to the mails, Howard NIML while it's here with us, he proposed that we have a discussion again on the pandemic, that healthcare, long-term providers, mental health, and we're going to go ahead and take that up here next week. And once again, Howard has gone on the listserv and explained that discussion thread and the technology. So sometimes we try very hard and we get a collective yawn from our membership. So I try not to be disappointed. I know change takes time. So Howard, I hope you can be equally understanding if there isn't excessive enthusiasm for what is a very relevant and appropriate topic. And 9OML AA4SL.
Of course, that's no problem. I just, in response to your call for with topic ideas, I thought that was timely, just as we may or may not be at the end. It appears Omicron's going down, whether something else will pop up or not, I don't know. But if this proves to be the end of some of the pressure, people will be in a different phase. The pace will slow back down. Some people have left the field. I was just kind of curious what people thought, and I thought it was something collectively as a field there better be some preparation and thought about. So that was where my head was, and I know that.
Well, thank you, Ed. We appreciate you bringing up the topic. How would you feel about leading the discussion next week here? I mean, I'll do the check-ins and then turn over that part to you. Is that something you'd be willing to do, Harry?
Yeah, if leading needs kind of moderating with my question in an academic sort of way, sure. I don't hold myself out as the expert on the topic, but I guess I'm the expert on the question I dreamt up, and I can talk to people in that sense. So that's no problem if that's what you wish.
No, of course. the way I view the DVNet is we have net check-ins by net control, and then we have moderated discussion. And of course, here we can make follow-up lists, ask particular questions, and then take a list of those that want to discuss that particular question. So, yeah, welcome very much a moderator, and the answers don't have to be from the moderator, but the panelists and the individuals that are here. We have some very talented ones that are very knowledgeable, fortunately, and I'm always finding that what is said on the net far exceeds my knowledge base. Thank you, Howard. And I know, first I'll go ahead.
Yeah, that'll be fine. I have no problem with that. I do not have the netlogger capability, so do you want to still do the regular check-ins and all, and then I can start the discussion, basically just like reading the question portion again. I'm not sure how much attention they got, and then roll the discussion from there, but that would be fine.
No, of course, that would be fine. And if you can monitor email, if there's anything that comes up, I can always forward you. But, just after each particular thread, just ask for input. We'll do that. I'm sure we can explore the methodology and find it to be functional, and it's actually healthy for a net to have different individuals involved. And as we see, that can sometimes suffer. I mean, it is so different on HF. You can't make any comparisons. But yeah, here we certainly are all on much more equal footing in talking to each other. The technology seems to work for most of us pretty well. Thank you, Howard. AA for the Marco, Medical Image Radio Council, DVNet, any other early check-ins? Thank you, call. No, no other early check-ins as of now, but we have a good core group. PY2BBQ, as I mentioned before, was with us, but he can't stay. VU3WTJ Sursendo is here. So it's approaching 9 o'clock at night in India, and it's very nice of Sursendo to join us. And from my point here, I'm in Hawthorne, which I'm going to be in the majority of time, although next Saturday I will be doing the net from South Florida, from Delray Beach, Palm Beach County. And other than working on the Ether this week and going to a lot of Gator sporting events with grandchildren, I found time to renew my dental license. So I'm still legal and can work for another 2 years if I so choose to. But short of somebody having an emergency needing me to fill in, I've kind of backed away from that and spend my time in other ways. And seems awfully young to be 63 and say that, but I've been doing this since 56 because of taking care of family, and there's still plenty of that here. Okay, hey, as far as I'll quick on the finger, letting it drop. Any other early check-ins? Medical Image Radio Council, DVNet. Go ahead and make your call. No, none other heard. This particular time of day was considered to be reasonable for selection. Unfortunately, Saturday mornings are probably very busy for anybody who has family or other obligations. Somebody like Sursendo being available at 9 at night, even into Japan being closer to midnight, is a possibility. But if we start going into the afternoon or into the evening the situation changes. And Saturday nights certainly are probably popular and difficult in the United States to get participation. But I'm ears for any suggestions of better times to run the net, even if it's during the week. So there's never a good time for everyone, and I've had a request from others that perhaps may have more opportunities to talk, especially people from California. Let me drop one. Being that California is 7 a.m., approaching 7 a.m. currently, it's a little early for some. I don't know if we'd have better participation if we did a weeknight at 7 or 8 o'clock, but again, what nights you pick, there's always the potential for conflicts unless we have just a meeting house type, like a coffee house, where people could stop by on a particular time every evening here locally in the United States. Something would have to be after 9 o'clock to include California, of course. But that would be 8 in the morning for Sunday, middle of the day for Japan. Think about that. Let's discuss that too here today. AA4FL, letting it stand by, getting ready for the next start. Please welcome to the Marco DVNet. This is AA4FL. Today, I'll be net control for the session. The purpose of the Marco Digital Voice Net is to provide a discussion forum for current and relevant issues. And today, we're going to be doing follow-up on the content of the ether, and in particular, general dentistry today. And the ether was on technology and education science in dentistry, and tomorrow we will pick up more on the science aspects of the Grand City here for credit, for CME credit. Let me let it drop one. For those of you that are listening and are not Marco stations, all stations, national and international, are welcome to join the net, participate in the discussion. If you just want to listen and you don't want to be involved in the roundtable discussion, that's fine too, but we still prefer that you check in so we know that you're here participating. It's a direct net working from a login list, and all calls will be made to me, the net control AA4FL. We're also on NetLogger. You can use the NetLogger program. There is a game window, a third button from the left in blue, which is the instant message window for monitoring instant messages. You can also email me at my email address. Where's that email address? Many of you have that already for a particular question and don't have NetLogger. I'm monitoring that as well. Again, let me let it drop in. We meet weekly on Saturdays at 1500 UTC to look for Peters throughout the world. And of course, we're originating today for me on a DV stick, coming in on the D-Star side of the stick. And others in our group are using different digital modalities. Thank you to the QuadNet Array for allowing us the luxury of being able to speak to each other. Different products, different equipment, different operating situations. Some of us require use of a computer as well. We appreciate their expertise and support in making the system run. There are a few housekeeping issues. Realize they're linked repeaters. They need to sync. So for everything to sync properly, make sure you pause. Pause before you transmit, and after someone else transmits, pause before keying up and let everything reset. We let it drop. As you notice, I am trying to honor the 2-minute commitment for letting things drop to make sure that everyone has the same operating procedure so that repeaters don't time out on you. Please consider that also the 2 minutes gives everyone a chance to have balanced discussion. We have times when we have discussion threads that we develop. We can stick to the topic and ask for a new thread, and we'll take a new list. At this time, we have had some limited check-ins already and early check-ins. Are there any stations with emergency or priority traffic for the net? Call AA4FL now. No traffic of that nature heard. As limited check-in, limited time check-ins, PY2BBQ checked in early and has to depart. He says hello to everyone. He has plans that prohibited him being here on the net today. Are there any stations that have already checked in or need to check in for limited time participation today? We can prioritize you early to get you on your way. Please go ahead and call AA4FL. Very fine. Well, thank you for everyone joining us today. I imagine we'll have some further check-ins. We're going to go ahead and take any additional regular time check-ins. I'm here, VU3WTJ, N9OML, N3IM, N5RTF, KD4IZ have already checked in. Any other stations that would like to check in at this time, please call AA4FL. No further calls at this time. We will ask again later. This again, AA4FL net control for the Marco DVNet, trying to multitask here today. And we are also monitoring email and the listserv for posts, incoming posts that might have questions. And if you have NetLogger, we're also monitoring NetLogger. I see, speaking of that WJ8B is here with us now. So I've got Andy checked in here as well. Welcome, Andy. And I don't see anybody else on NetLogger currently who's not already checked in. Yes, good morning, Andy. Andy's always very adept at communicating with us and giving us background information in real time here using NetLogger. So today's topic is about follow-up on the ether about general dentistry. Both sessions this weekend, this and the Grand Rounds are going to talk about dentistry. Today, we're going to focus more on the technology of offices of general dentistry. You know, the real-world considerations for patient care. Is newer better? And how does the patient benefit? And I will lead the roundtable discussion today. We will have weeks where there are other topics that other members will be leading the roundtable discussion. Next week, that will be N9OML, talking about the stress that participants in the healthcare providing system are experiencing and the impacts of the long-term mental health aspects of that will be Howard's conversation next week. So I hope you'll be here as well. Let me let it drop one. If you've had a chance to read the ether, particularly the pages about the general dentistry, the slant that I've taken as somebody that's grown up with the technology and been a beta tester and an early adopter and has also taught the technology for general dentistry at both the dental school level and CE courses for professional organizations. My personal perspective is I've been able to apply the technology, but also realize there are situations that affect the choice of when to apply it, and that it needs to be in the benefit of the patient. General dentists, especially solo practitioners, don't have anyone looking over their shoulders, so when it comes to ethics, you're your own person, and patients don't always understand the quality aspects. They know if something doesn't hurt. They know about cost. They know if you have good bedside manner. But there's a clinical functionality of acceptability, and one is expected to at least meet that and surpass it. I'm going to drop one. General dental offices are about 79% of dental practices. The rest are specialists dividing up between the specialty fields, and as the Jack and I, KD4IZ, who's here with us, and he's going to be focusing tomorrow on the science of dentistry, but as we presented in the ether, there's a lot of considerations in technology and science. So is dentistry an art like it had been in years past, 40, 50, 60 years ago? Were we mechanics of the mouth? Are dentists physicians of the mouth? Are we stomatologists? Are we science-based? So that was the theme of the ether. Let me let it drop when I'm going to check in for TSC, and I see Jerry is here with us now. Let me let it drop one. Another consideration of general dentistry and offices of general dentistry, we're not prohibited from practicing some of the procedures that specialists are. But when we do, we're expected to reach the standard that a specialist would. We have to know when to refer, and no two dentists are identical in their strengths and clinical weaknesses. Continuing education, of course, is a foundation for our participation in keeping up to date on the science and technology in the areas of dentistry we choose to practice. But we can limit our practices. If someone just wants to do fillings and nothing else, that's certainly fair. However, from a standpoint of running a business, one also has to make business decisions and has to be profitable enough to stay in practice, again, while honoring the patient's best interests. Let me drop. Most general dentist offices are high overhead environments. It's moving more towards corporate dentistry as a lot of students come out with 300,000 plus debt burdens. They don't have the money to borrow to start a practice, which was the prevailing option or choice 50, 60 years ago, very much a cottage industry. And it's hard to be able to afford the time to do all the CE opportunities, and sometimes a corporate environment is important to the quality of life for individuals. With 70 to 80% overhead, it's not a lot of luxury. Imagine a situation like the pandemic, what that effect has been on profitability and people being able to stay in practice with all that overhead and the losses of revenue stream. It's very complicated running a general dentist office, and some people are suited for it, and some aren't. And again, you have to choose your own niche in the way you want to practice, hopefully based on the patient's best interest. I mean, let it drop. After I finish up here talking about the technology and how that affects the ethics, we'll open it up for questions in the roundtable fashion going down the list and let you ask away. Sir Senda will be first on the list in India, and we'll let him explain his take on this subject matter from an Indian perspective and anything else Sir Senda would like to present about what's happening with COVID in India. When it comes to ethics, if someone has a very expensive piece of equipment, and this is one of the reasons why I sold my small town practice so they can take care of family, I got to the point where the technology was just too expensive to be considered to be ethically used for profitability because it would slant your clinical decision making processes. So the question is if you're producing, for example, a CAD CAM or computer assisted versus a computer manufactured restoration, are you doing it in the patient's best interest? Is there a clinical benefit to doing what would be a small to medium filling of standard technology versus one that's produced high tech for 3 to 4 times the cost? Would you get 3 to 4 times the serviceability? And my decision was pretty clear. Let me let it drop one. I'll give you another example. In the case of that particular equipment, so it's the economy of scale, the ability to reach your overhead. So if you produced, for example, 20 restorations a month, we break even. Anything above that would be profitable. You may not even do 20 cases a month where it's absolutely required for the benefit of the patient. And that's the dilemma of the crux. The other is if you're designing to take on procedures such as implant placement in the dental office, anatomically, one or two-dimensional radiographs adequate for placement of implants? Is the patient at a detriment, at higher risk for not making a referral in that case? How much training do you have? It can be some pretty serious consequences of improper implant placement, and also the ability of the implants to be successful is very dependent upon proper training. So many general dentists do invest in equipment, 3D imaging, and they also receive advanced training because they want to do implants, something their patients demand, and they still have situations where they probably involve prosthodontists. But certainly simple cases of 1 or 2 implants are very doable in a general dental office. With that being said, Mr. Sendu, I'm going to put you up first on the list, and anything that you have to discuss in that realm or in any other fashion from India, please go ahead. V3WTJ AA4FL.
Patient to go for some advanced technology. But it is, of course, advanced technologies are very helpful to diagnose the diseases much more accurately, but still these hindrances are there. So this is the one thing that we are observing in our day-to-day dental practice. Over.
Okay, I'm not copying Mr. Sendu now. He was here earlier. It's give his regards. And it was nice to have him check in. It's after 9 o'clock at night here on a Saturday night, so we appreciate him stopping by. Howard, and I know him now as someone who might have an interest in the subject matter. What is your perspective and what you've involved on the patient end? Over.
Morning, Jay, and everybody on the net. I hope everybody's doing well. Um, as a tactical medic, we did receive some training in dental emergencies, and again, mostly temporizing measures to provide some pain relief and prevent further damage. As a patient, my curiosity question is when students come out of school with that kind of debt burden and are really faced with only the option of joining a corporate practice, probably, or perhaps buying into a local practice, why did dentistry evolve in such a way that the dentists maintain all their test equipment? Other types of physicians will send you for a test at the hospital and then work with the results, or at a test center, an MRI center or something. And yet dentistry seems to have evolved where, in spite of the initial startup burden, they need to acquire their own test equipment. I'm just curious why, for economy of scale, this wasn't done in a fashion more similar to some of the medical practices. Over.
That's a very good question, and certainly it is something that could be done. There could be diagnostic centers in bigger communities where you would send the patient and not have to insure the equipment for economy of scale. On the CAD CAM side, that wouldn't necessarily solve the problem if you planned on manufacturing and producing restorations, because the point and the benefit for particularly crowns or full coverage of teeth covering the crown of the tooth with a cap. The big advantage is producing on the spot the permanent restoration so that the patient can have it without having to wear a temporary restoration until a permanent one is manufactured. A hybrid approach, as is shown in the ether, works in that regard, where you can, if you want to make the temporary, the scanning systems on the CAD side, the computer assisted design, are not expensive. A lot of laboratories will supply them, and it's the manufacturing aspect that tends to involve more training and more tedious. So you can still have the benefits of the technology and not have to take a standard impression, get the better quality of a digital impression, and still have the laptop. Let me drop one. I will have to look back at some of my writing, Howard, but I believe I did have an article that talked about this very subject, about having it affect the way that offices are set up, rather than having single dental offices in their own buildings, having communal equipment and having the dentists use that, so they're rather than having a group practice. In many individual practices that share the technology, uh, that's not the way that it has unfolded, but it's something that we identified late in the last century, going into the beginning of the first decade of this century. I believe I wrote about that at one time with the Florida Dental Association Journal. I think I called the article Dentistry 2010 Pulp Fiction. It was written about 10 years before that, right around the turn of the century. So I hope that answers some of the question. I'm going to let it drop one and talk about it in perspective of radiology. I see Jack is here. I'm going to let KD4 Isaac pick up and also comment as a dentist, a specialist, and give his perspective to answer your question, Howard. But the other aspect, again, is radiology. So if you're placing implants, if you're doing single implants, the technology choices are a little more clear. But as a general dentist, you're not required to be a prosthodontist. And if you're looking at doing complicated cases in your training, it is possible to send a patient to a specialist to give that information. But again, who's going to read it? It's not we have general radiologists that are accessible for that particular person purpose. So you're going to send them to a specialist that would be the one that would also be placing the implants. It's sort of a competitive reason if you'd send them to a periodontist or maxillofacial surgeon or a prosthodontist, which are the three prevailing specialties that would place implants. Jack, how about comment in KD4? How is that? Yeah, hang on a minute. I needed to adjust the volume here. I had a couple of not anticipated. Sorry about that. Howard asked a very interesting question, and I'm going to keep my answer as short as possible. How serious is the dropout, Shay? Was serious when you said I'm keep it as short as possible, and with the answer, and then we missed everything after that. Over. Well, that's not very promising sounding. I hope I do better. I'm going to switch over to the 9700 and see if that's any better. Jay, very quickly. Okay, I see the 9700. Your audio is much better now. Over. Okay, sorry about that. I was trying to work at the workstation, not at the cam station, but I guess I'll be holding a mic in my left hand and writing with my right hand. Um, it's a historical issue, I think, that answers the other half of Howard's question, and that is we were the barber surgeons, really until the middle of the 1800s. And barber surgeons were treated as medical second-class citizens. Um, those who have actually established practices were not highly regarded in the United States by the medical community, and as a result, they had to go it alone. Not able to work together well, and often do, but there was a lot of bias, and so the solo practitioner, that was sort of the pinnacle. That's what dentistry stood for and aimed at for the better part of a century and a quarter. And the economy of scale was there at the time because outside of a few mechanical things and a supply chain, you really didn't need very much. Now that has changed and changed radically. So I think Kay's answers are right on. Katie Forrest. Thank you for the explanation, Jack. I'm going to turn it back to Howard and 9 on those follow-up questions. Go ahead, Howard.
You guys covered it. I mean, the natural follow-up is, do either of you see changes where hospitals will include, for example, dental imaging technology? Let's presume that it continues to evolve. And then community dentists with some people. But other than that, I have other questions from what I read, but I'll yield for now and let you work your way around, and I'll come up with another one of them from what I read. I think that sounds fair. But do you guys see the evolution where you would see your dentist might send you for the appropriate testing, and then you'd see him for follow-up for the actual definitive care.
Well, I'm going to answer it first from a standpoint of someone who practiced in a small town that was about 20 miles from a potential site for that, or more from that. Accessibility for great segments of the population and affordability come to play. The other question would be medical insurance. So much different from dental insurance. You'd be referring them, but hospitals would not be able to provide the services under the dental insurance realms necessarily. There'd have to be a lot of agreement with insurance companies, and most people don't have dental insurance regardless. Dental insurance tends to be so different that I refer to it as dental health policies. Most policies have a limit per year. The luxury would be $1,000 a year, which is the same amount as the 1970s. And the ones that don't have the year limit greatly reduce the benefits. So you're dealing with HMOs or PPOs and dentists that sign up for them. Again, with 80% overhead, how much can you drop your fees and still produce? I think, from what I remember, 25% reduction in fees means a 400% increase in patient load to achieve the same profitability. Jack, I'm going to go ahead and let you pick up from that now, Katie Forza.
Okay, very good. Yeah, I think that's a tremendous issue, and it believe it or not, scales all the way up to the level of dental schools. Dental education is one of the most expensive, really, one of the most expensive medical specialties, and getting somebody through a 4-year program is quite costly, and because states no longer have state funded and supported dental schools. They now are state affiliated dental schools or some other. Very frequently, the cash cow that kept them open is gone, and so there's a struggle just to survive at that level. So students are put in a bind, and it's a tough field to go into because of that. Howard, I'm sure I'm not hitting on the right answer to the questions that you have here, but I can tell you that relying on the medical train to provide appropriate dental diagnostic information for testing, it just doesn't happen. There's no interest. There's no money, as Jay said. It's not funded by insurance. So it's an ongoing issue. Hopefully that got closer to the question you needed answered. Katie Isaac.
AA4FL net control, and we'll move down the list and have some follow-up discussion. I'm sure others have similar questions. From somebody who's on the board of the Alumni Association of Dental School and a past president here at UF, historically I was in the sixth class. That's sixth graduating class in 1982. The first class was 1976, and I was at the school in that first year too. I was already at UF, and actually was in the dental building doing some research, which Chip would be glad to hear, was actually in psychology and dentistry. I did some independent research in psychology on fear in dentistry. But I can tell you that back then, as Jack just said, the state funding was very high. I can't remember the exact percentages, probably about 60%, whereas now I suppose it's in double digits, low double digits. Last I remember it was 16 or 17% state funding, and they're dumping all the Medicaid patients, which are low profitability, on the dental schools. So the Alumni Associations and donations and grants research has been big in supplying the money to cover the dental school. At UF, my understanding is that the dental college, it is the highest of any student in any department on campus to educate a student per person basis. And they're still graduating now with 300,000 plus. I've had dental students graduate that didn't like dentistry, that already owed the money and had to figure out a way to pay back the loans, and ones that decided, of course, in their first or second year to not proceed with dental school and let it drop one. Just so we don't forget, on page 3 of the ether, there's pictures here of some clinical situations and also carry into 4, and I'd like to review them after this first go around. The pictures happen to be mine, so I can give you a perspective on some of the experiences that a dentist with a patient has experienced with general dentistry and the specialty aspects of care, and that situations arise even with excellent oral hygiene and good oral health where you can still get into expensive problems. Next on our list, Keith N3IM, why don't you pick up the discussion and, of course, ask any of your own questions too as well. Go ahead, Keith.
Hey, A4FL in the group, this is N3IM. I really don't have many questions or discussions. I just want to let you guys know that over the next ensuing 6 to 8 weeks, I'll be in and out of the DVNet and the Grand Rounds on Sunday because of collegiate boxing. And but the discussion reminds me very much of my situation before the turn of the century, with Medicare reimbursements and insurance reimbursements dropping below the level of sustainability. This is N3I, back to the group.
Thank you for making the medical connection there, Keith. Contracts with insurance companies sometimes can affect the way one practices. Obviously, profitability is affected, and I'm sure shifts in the nature of medicine are equally enforced in terms of individual private practices, green group practices, and hospital affiliations and such. So thank you for bringing that up. This is a societal issue that's not limited to dentistry. The technology is very expensive, and sometimes it's even when it's in the best interest of the patient, it results in better health. It almost comes across as having to be a rationing of care, but even more so, who's suffering the burden of the providing? How does it affect the individual practitioner, whether it be a physician or a dentist, and also, of course, on the patient side? N5RTF, go ahead, Jim.
N4FL and 5RTF. Good morning, Jay in the group. It's a foggy morning in the swamp. When the net started, the visibility was about 150 feet, but it's burning off now, and the birds are starting to fly in. As you know, Terry's father was a dentist, had a really good life. He was technically very well respected. I was in 5RTF.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. In my circle of friends, I've had one dentist commit suicide. I don't know if we're still in the top 5 or not. Fortunately, we've also been in the top 5 for respect in professions, 1 or 2 for quite a while. So yes, there's stress, but nowadays in life there's stress in everything. And the way dentistry used to be practiced, the low tech aspects, the artistry aspects, you probably felt quite a need for clinical expertise of a personal nature. Now we've got so many better aids to assist us where it's not just our own hands, but also things like the laboratories and dentists at one time were probably a great many of them making their own gold crowns it was part of my licensing requirement here was to actually sling gold and make a crown during the licensing aspect of the profession, which of course is not done now. So I had to prepare it on the patient and then make my own crown. So that obviously is much different profession now with the computer assisted devices. But I don't know if that's currently the case. Let me let it drop one. From 2000 to 2004, I was on the Council of Communications, the American Dental Association, representing the 17th district, the 17 district nation. And we quite frequently had presentations on dentistry and communications and how you would communicate with different demographics within dentistry. I don't remember us ever really bringing up suicide as being a prevailing concern at the ADA level at that time. I'm sure someone might have in membership, but I didn't perceive that as being the overall situation as it had been considered in previous years. Go ahead, Chip.
Okay, on a happier note, I had the acquaintance of an older dentist when I was practicing in Canton, Mississippi. He had an office next door to us. A friend of mine said he had the touch of a blacksmith, but he was a delightful fellow and um, served the community very well. But from the 1940s on, dentists were, along with jewelers, were the only people who were allowed to buy and own gold. So he would buy the legal limit 1 ounce of gold every month from the 1940s all the way up until it was no longer controlled. And he bought it at $35 an ounce. He had safety deposit boxes completely full of gold. I wonder if you know anyone who took advantage of that program in 5RTF.
I started in 1982. Don't really remember stories. The dentist I bought the practice from did have a little bit, but not much. He practiced from the 1960s on. I'm sure your friend's experience was not limited to himself. I'm just glad all the dentists that used to get cocaine as part of their practice didn't do the same. I remember one of my friend's grandfather had been an oral surgeon and he came and put a surgical kit and found the cocaine he had. And I remember Dennis getting slapped on the wrist here locally for rubbing cocaine on the gums therapeutically, of course not allowed in the 1980s. But yes, thank you for mentioning that, Chip. And Father, yes, go ahead.
Well, that's about all I have to say. But I do admire dentists since I've known some, closely in my family. I think they do wonderful work, and I need to see one myself pretty soon. In 5RTF clear.
Well, thank you for your comments, Chip, and for your appreciation from those of us that are here in the profession. It's gratifying to always hear. We see we adopt the same respect as physicians from the public. Again, we're one of those professions that was in the top five for being in esteem up there. I think clergy might have exceeded us at the time. I'm not sure what's happened in the last 20 years. A lot of changes in society. So who knows where we're at. It's amazing how a decade can bring on so much change, and technology, as we're talking about, has affected the education of dentistry, and that's another issue. We'll talk about the science and education. I mentioned the continuing education. Here in Florida, it's 30 units of CE, but it's kind of a farce in a way because I took an online class that took 6 hours. It took me about an hour and a half to get through the course. It's provided by the Board of Dentistry. So even the Board of Dentistry seems to have a profit motive that compromises ethics. I'm going to turn it over to Kay D4IZ next, Jack. Go ahead. Thank you, Jay. I took a look at what's going on here, and I have my issue taken care of. At least I hope so. How's the audio? The audio seems a little hot now. It was better before. I don't know if you're off to 9700 again, but last go around you were doing fine. Over. Okay, maybe a small tweak and it should be enough to make a difference. But I seem to be modulating okay according to the scope. I'm not sure if you finished that communication, Jack, because after you mentioned scope, you dropped. Do you want to go ahead and present some comments? Go ahead. Things are tremendously meaningful. I really feel like yeah, I'm back on the 9700. I don't know if it'll hold up. I think I have a hotspot issue, different from the one that Gary is having, but certainly. Really appreciate Chip's comments. Not sure. I've heard all of this. Recently, I've heard that actually veterinarians have a higher suicide rate. My daughter is in vet school at Colorado State over in Fort Collins, and it is stressful. The problem is not your patient when you're a veterinarian. The problem is the owner. Dentistry has a stressor, and if you're not prepared to deal with that stress, you know that you're going to inflict pain. And dealing with the stress of inflicting pain on somebody else is difficult. People have psychological issues about dentistry because of that. And so you wind up having to do a lot of behavior management with people. And they don't always help. So I don't know. It is kind of an issue. Personally, I did have a bit of a problem with that, and while I was teaching, I always would stress out over major cases where a patient had a behavioral or an anxiety problem. Ironically, I'm one of those individuals that likes to tackle problems straight on until I wound up with a large patient population of special patient care individuals who had either psychological problems, personality issues, multiple personalities, or they were disabled in one way or another. And frequently they're the ones that ignore their dental health. So I was part of a team that did a lot of work with them, including hospital treatment. So Chip, good comments and very good points. Just a little note about the gold thing. I was in school just a few years before Jay. I started in 77, 78. We were required to buy quite a bit of gold as students, and I did not use it all, and some of it was put into my lab work that I submitted for credit. All of that stuff helped pay for some of my debts later on when the price went off the wall. But we bought at 32 and sold at
you can get KD4 ice back to that.
N4TAC.
Okay, I see that Jerry N4TSC was able to get back here on the net, and you're getting close to the point where you're going to be called on. Jack, I started in '78, so I had it was similar. Yeah, I was there when gold went up, also to like $1,200 an ounce. So what I had done is that if a patient had a bridge, since we were manufacturing our own, um, sometimes I would give them just back the gold. But if it was a woman, particularly who I thought would like it, I would take her old gold and make her a piece of jewelry, a pendant, a heart. And I found that patients appreciated that greatly. I mean, it was the same gold. I just didn't give it back to them in the form of an old crown. I gave it to them in the form of jewelry, and that was a special relationship. For me, on the stress end, dentistry was about treating the patient, not the teeth. I was fortunate enough to do that senior research undergrad in 1976 on stress and dentistry and management techniques, and that's probably why I got into dental school at age, I guess I was age 18 when I applied, and I got in at 19. I already had my undergraduate degrees. And they took a chance on me. I guess they figured that I really had a feel for the subject material, even had no dentist in my family. I'm going to turn it over to Andy, WJAB, before heading on to Jerry. Go ahead, Andy. WJAB, Andy, you still with us? Go ahead. Okay. Just in case Andy dropped out for a minute here, had to leave for a minute. Let's go ahead and bring on Jerry, N4TSC. Go ahead, Jerry.
Okay, thank you, Jay. Sorry about the issues that I had this morning. I was surprised my hotspot wasn't working. So I wasn't able to participate in the early portion of your net, and then I finally found you online and then ultimately got the hotspot working again. I just have two questions and then a comment. My first question is, how does the output of dentists from dental schools match up with the projected need? That's question number one. And then question number two is there an explanation for the level of suicides among dentists? And then let me make a comment about that anecdotally. Just wait one. Okay, you get any of that? Very happy and talented high school friend who became a dentist. And I then learned he committed suicide while in the Army and stationed in Alaska. And the way I learned about it was I had another friend who, ironically, became my dentist here in South Florida and had been a close friend of mine in freshman year in college. And we discovered he was a roommate of my dental friend who had committed suicide while in the Army in Alaska. And I have scratched my head trying to figure out why such a happy and talented person would commit suicide. He was a terrific pianist and a wonderful center of attraction, a very social animal. And in terms of my friend, who also became my dentist, he was very social as well. So I could never really understand that. I just wonder if there's been any explanation as to why the level of suicides have been so high. With that, let me turn it back to you, Jay. AA4FL and 4TS.
Okay, yeah, it was a good question. I don't know if it's the problem that it used to be compared to other vocations. Again, years ago, it was a very technically precise profession, and you really had to concentrate highly on the technical expertise, and there's frustration if you fell up short. I'm sure there were many other reasons for the high suicide rates, but I don't think it's as much as it used to be. But I have to research that. Again, I mentioned only one of my friends, only one person that I'm aware of, and anyone I've known has committed suicide, who was a dentist. Someone that got depressed and took his life. There seems to be a lot more sharing these days. There's dental associations. It's easy to connect with people with social media. There's practices that are expanded. You're not always a solo practitioner. And I'm sure the opportunities to interact and have feedback and support mechanisms has greatly increased. On the graduate end, I'm going to let it drop one, and I'm going to try not to be critical, but I am going to make a statement that may come across from a practical standpoint. Hang on. From a standpoint of student loans and a standpoint of high cost of technology and starting a practice, decisions, no matter who graduates and how many people graduate, tend to be chasing the upper 10% of the population that doesn't have to rely on insurance to pay the bills and to go into an area like a coastal area in Florida or a major metropolitan area where it's more wealthy. You may be chasing the upper 10% of the population for 90% of your patient load. There's not a lot of loan payback positions for some. Military certainly has a path for that. It used to be more in dentistry where you have 25,000 a year in an underserved area towards your debt paid back. That is a current issue in dentistry that's being discussed, but they have closed dental schools because for a while, even though the need had been met and the cost was going up, dental schools felt they couldn't get enough quality applicants. That's reversed. Unfortunately, some of the new schools are there for profit now too, so it's complicated. Let me let it drop one and I'll pick it up. So we'll have to see what happens. When we were in ADA, one of the discussions was as women started moving up from 10 or 15% of dental classes towards at that time 30% area, and now probably, of course, over 50%. Would they practice less hours? Would there be a manpower issue for that reason? I don't think that's necessarily come to play, but we do have an aging population of dentists as well. They're very frustrated because they can't seem to sell their practices. I've got a friend in that situation right now, cannot find a buyer for his practice because it's in a small town, not in a desirable area, which answers your manpower question, Jerry. No, let's go ahead and ask a follow-up if you need to. Go ahead. And for TSC.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jay. I'm just wondering, I know that when I was an undergraduate, there was talk of sort of a balance between dental school and medical school, and yet we were sort of led to believe that there needed to be a test of dexterity and a test of skills in having to be able to do the function of a dentist, and it was perceived by those of us who were undergraduates trying to figure out where we wanted to go in the medical area, whether that was a barrier, and it seemed that the barrier to dental school was more intimidating than it was to medical school. I just wonder whether those kinds of exams may be things that limit the number of qualified, quote unquote, applicants. Back to you, Jay.
Yeah, that's changed dramatically. Back when I was graduating, there were very few regional boards that involved multiple states. Florida, until recently, was its own licensing exam. And ironically, things like ethical concerns that you mentioned, showing your expertise, there are very small lesions that I would not even consider by today's standards to be ones that I would treat. I would work for preventative means without active treatment, but those were the standards for proving your clinical efficiency. How small could you make the restoration on something that was in a very incipient form, ethically today considered to be inapplicable and a violation of the patient? So things do change over time. As I'm sure that the field for dentistry is much different now. There was a period in the early 2000s when I noticed in dental students, some of my electives, I was having children of dentists and physicians take my electives because they were, the technology in the dental office, and they were taking over for their parents on the dentist side. On the medical side, there was a frustration with insurance by the physicians that sent their kids to dental school instead during that period of time. I don't know if that's still a common situation. I was teaching those classes probably between 1998 and 2005 at the dental school level. Let me go ahead and move on to WJAD. We'll come back for follow-up questions, Jerry, later. Go ahead, Andy.
Okay, let me make sure you have me this time.
QSL.
Okay, yeah, I started up my MDV and things on all three modes instead of just D-Star, and finished my little routine. Some guy on DMR came up and says, "You're on the wrong node." I looked up, okay. I was on all three, that's what happened. Apparently the default was DMR. So. But anyhow, a lot of the things you guys are talking about from the dentistry standpoint definitely apply to medicine. I started my office in 1981, and I had a partner who had gotten it started. So our investment up front was not terribly bad. I mean, we had to buy medical tables, we had to have good stethoscopes and otoscopes and so forth, but I already had part of that because I used them in residency and purchased them for that. And of course, you had to have enough money to pay the rent, or lease number, and have a place to live. So, but as time went on, that number gradually went up. By the time I left that practice and moved to the larger city, it was up to 52%. That particular medical group failed, and after about 2.5, 3 years of me being there, although I had been there for 40 years, I ended up practicing as an HMO, which was a capitated model, and that failed after about 8 or 9 years, and ended up back with a very large primary care only group with, at that time, about 60 docs, but over 350 docs now. But everything seems to be based on economy of scale, and that was particularly true of the hospitals. The hospitals want to own primary care practices, and really all specialties, because they not only want, uh, they want the economy of scale, but they also want control. And they kicked us out of the hospital in 2009, and really that was because they said we always office-based physicians had longer length of stay, and of course that was true because you can't be in two places at the same time. So most of us quit the hospital at that point and just kept our offices. But it goes on and on. So I think I'll leave it at that. That's enough comments for now. But it really does parallel what you're saying about dentists as well. So back to you, Jay, from WJD.
Okay, thank you very much, Andy. I see we've got Merrill here with us in California. I'm checking you in, Merrill. I don't know how much you've had a chance to listen in on the conversation. Do you have any questions about the dentistry as presented in the ether, just in case you hadn't been monitoring the conversation? Go ahead and we'll try to answer them before we move on to additional thread of information discussion. Go ahead, Merrill.
Okay, Kay. No, I just got here. As you were, I don't set alarms, and so it's 8 o'clock in California, and I just woke up about 10 minutes ago. The ether was outstanding. I can't believe. I mean, you must have been a really, really, really talented professional and teacher. It was a wonderful article, and I can't wait to see what your next topic is going to be. And I couldn't figure out how to log in via NetLogger. I see you've logged me in, and it seemed to me that once before I was able to log myself in and tell you I was here. WW6AA is listening.
Well, thank you for joining us, Merrill, and we'll continue the discussion. Are there any other late check-ins? Anybody else that's listening that would like to be involved? Just feel free to check into the Marco DV Net. We're talking about dentistry today. Go ahead and make a call. Okay. No, as Andy said, the medical and dentistry similarities make a lot of sense because, after all, the argument here now is that dentistry is just a physician of the mouth, or certainly that's the goal. That we're not the mechanics of the mouth, we're just the artistry. But on the other hand, one of the reasons I chose dentistry was because of the artistry, with the ability to be creative and also the focus on prevention. I mean, that seems to be lost in the discussion, even on the science, but in some of the writing that I've done through the years on the technology, the ultimate goal for me is biomimetics. I mean, can you look at embryology? Can you take a tooth bud and replicate what happens naturally and implant the tooth bud to have a natural tooth develop versus to have a treatment to do so or an implant to do so? So that also appealed to me. I mean, for me, uh, the greatest goal would be to eliminate the need for oneself in prevention. And there was quite a few others that had similar philosophy. We've gotten away from that now. You look at dental journals these days, and they cut down teeth for cosmetics things that we would consider sacrilege because that's the patient demand. Again, that's the 10% of the marketplace with disposable income. And the dental, certainly the one, not the professional journals, but the dental magazines for me, like the dental economics type of focused, are strictly focused on that. These areas of profitability in the practice, because aesthetics are not something covered by insurance. So only people are going to ask for these extreme care are the people that can afford to pay for it. Tyler, if you let it drop one. I'm going to change the discussion now. For Jack and I mutually did this issue of the ether, so thank you for the compliments, Meryl. Certainly the design is very similar to the way I designed online classes for dentistry. I was awarded Dentist of the Year in I think 2001 in Florida. It wasn't for my technical expertise; it was for the volunteering to do the first online classes for the Florida Dental Association, bringing everybody up on communications as chair of communications at the FDA at the time. The page number 2 and 3 here. I mean, for Jack and I, I'm talking about the history of modern dentistry as a prelude. That's page 2. Page 3 and 4 of the ether are more in general dentistry. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. Tomorrow on the grand rounds of science, on page 5 and 6 will be more of Jack's focus, if he's the one that's going to be the main speaker, and I'll be the net controller and moderator. But going to page 3, I just want to discuss what you see on that page. If you don't have anything in front of you, I understand that, but if you want to bring it up on your computer, that might be helpful. And if you can bring up the ether on the computer during this time, I'll talk slowly here. There's a screenshot on the left column of page 3 that shows a digital dental office diagrammatically. This was a major company. When I first got involved with this company, they were private and they were bought out by one of the major dental supply companies. This particular grad, I was a beta tester, and dating back to the old DOS days and coming into Windows. So when you look at the diagram, every function on this is active. If you click on the denture, you get to select the patient. If you click on one of the areas for X-rays, you'll get the X-ray module. So technology can be appropriately integrated. You're not limited if you don't have digital radiography, which the time I was doing it, almost no one did. You click on the X-ray camera here, and you would get that module would come up. If you click on the clock, you get the schedule, et cetera, the progress notes. You click on, you get electronic progress notes. So I had the opportunity to have an office that was well ahead of its time, and the benefit was for 20 years I had data on patients to make my clinical decisions by real data, gum measurements, progress notes that were truly digital that you could sort by tooth on the chart. Everything was integrated together. Everyone was trained to make sure it was done in a standardized fashion. Let it drop one. But in spite of being a dentist having excellent health care, on the second column, the right column on page 3, there's a few images of my teeth, one showing a crack. And I just had a silver filling. The silver filling was relatively small. It was put in there because of incipient decay or just decay that was just starting in the grooves of the teeth. At the top of the teeth, which didn't fissure part of the tooth, is where food gets caught. And often, toothbrush bristles bigger. Decay will start in those areas, which is much different than smooth surface decay, where the decay where the two surfaces meet each other. And there's an arrow there that shows there's really no evidence of a crack in a two-dimensional image. But the crack is present in the camera image, and it shows you that even though there's a small filling. I mean, why do you get cracks? Well, also, the fillings tend to have sharp angles internally, and you get somebody gets further back in the mouth, the forces of mastication are higher. And it's not necessarily a person abusing their teeth. This is something that happened with age. So the question is, would a white colored or resin filling that was bonded in have prevented the crack? Quite possibly. So that's a reason for doing bonding. That's how we have material science. It's an improvement. This particular tooth was cracked all the way down the root of the tooth. The root canal was not adequate to save the tooth. And an implant was done, and the implant's actually on the next page, page 4. I'm going to let it drop one. I'll explain a little bit more. So assuming this tooth did not have a crack and it had a silver filling on the top, and one might be afraid that the tooth would crack, what would be the clinical suggestion? Would you take out the silver filling as a practitioner because people have heard about amalgam and the mercury component, even though free mercury may not actually be an issue for that particular restoration? Would you take out the filling to prevent a crack, especially if you see some surface grazing or superficial cracks starting? Quite possibly that would be a good recommendation. But how do you do that? Do you just cut out the silver filling and put a glued in or bonded filling when it has material science? Where the white colored resin filling is actually connected to the tooth structure in such a way that the stresses are relieved and preventing and preserving tooth structure? Or would you be more aggressive and cover more of the tooth, involve more of the tooth? How conservative would you be? And the other technological consideration, where sometimes the ethics come into play, or would you use some of the modern technologies, what we call indirect restorations? Let me let it drop one. So an indirect restoration is one that's made outside of the mouth, usually traditionally off of an impression on a model on the computer, a digital scan that can be designed and manufactured right in the office. And a lot of general dentist offices have that equipment. But is that superior to a small filling made directly, traditionally, through the artistry of the dentist, bonding or gluing it and building it up by layer inside the tooth versus having it manufactured? So here's the rub. If someone invested in a high-cost piece of equipment and their profitability may be 20 units per month, combination of indirect fillings and crowns, and they make all profit after those 20, does that affect their decision-making process? Do you go to corporate offices that are trained in convincing patients that that's in their best interest, aside from private practitioners making the decisions, or the corporate decisions that are made outside of the practitioner's realm? And that's some of the stresses and the problems that are here present. So I'm going to go on to page 4 and explain some of the technology. On the upper left, there's a 2D radiography sensor. I believe it's CMOS sensor that explains the type of digital sensor that converts the X-ray radiation into an image that's directly transferred to the computer. It's also possible to have sensors that are wireless and not wired. Of course, we cover everything, so sterility is primarily important. Does that become difficulty in areas where people have bones that stick out or children that have small mouths? You can buy smaller sensors. Generally, for an office, you're going to have at least 2 sensors and the different size sensors, and they costly of each individual sensor. The image in the center, the panoramic or the full mouth image, was made a little bit differently, and let me explain that. I'll let it drop one. The image is captioned 2D panoramic image, and that one in that particular case was looking at the amount of bone. You might use that in a child, very appropriate, age 8 or 9, to look for developing teeth, because you want to get a scan of the mouth to look for that. You may be looking a little older, for age 12 or 13, for wisdom, the beginning of wisdom teeth, probably more up into 15 and 16. You may be looking at developmental issues during the teenage years, missing teeth have not erupted. So that particular one, the equipment to the left of it is a 2D panoramic unit. It is direct capture that's currently used in this particular office, which was my office where I sold it. But at the particular time, I chose a different digital technology around 2001. In addition to the sensors which I had these particular plates and plates that were the size of the sensor on the upper left and child size. It's called a phosphor plate technology, which is basically a scanner. So you expose these plates to radiation, and you would put them in the scanner, and they'd be directly added into the chart. Let me let it drop one. Well, a well-designed software system allows every office to adapt the technology to the needs and the way they want to practice. Fortunately, I was a beta tester, and I had direct input on that. So in this particular case, what would be, we'd set up a template. We have a digital chart. We would know how many teeth are involved in this particular X-ray. In this particular one on me, it was 31. So it would still record it as 32 teeth. And as the image was scanned, it would directly attach that image to every tooth on the digital chart. You could click on any tooth in the mouth on the digital chart and bring up a full history of all X-rays, all gum measurements, anything that was ever done, camera images, anything that ever was associated with that tooth would be there for the dentist to manage. And unfortunately, I'm in a rural area, which would be difficult to sell a dental office. But someone particularly wanted my dental office because of the way we not have the technology, but the way we applied the technology. They had 20 years of data that they could use to manage patients' health care, something that you can't possibly measure the time. Let me go ahead and let it drop on to explain one other aspect. On all 3 dental X-ray images, the 2 that show that implant, one has the implant body, the other one has the implant crown, and the crown, there's 3 aspects to an implant. The implant body, the parts of the crown is going to be cemented or screwed onto, which is called an abutment that goes inside the body, and that abutment replicates what would be otherwise the natural tooth prepared for a cap or a crown. Where we get into the decision-making process, where it's applicable for a general dental office, if you look below the implant body, you'll see a horizontal black area. That's the mandibular canal. And as you have a nerve, major nerve there, the further back you get, The closer to the surface, the more likely that you're going to have that violated, and you would institute paresthesia. Again, it's a two-dimensional image. There's also a lingual nerve that runs in the third molar area. So if you're doing all these planning for implants and you don't have three-dimensional imaging, you have to be very, very careful. That being said, I'm going to open up for discussion now. I'm going to start with N910 Howard.
That's very interesting, Jay. It's not that often I get to play ask the dentist. Normally, he talks to me and I can't say anything because he's got ovals in my mouth. So, it's interesting topics. I'm not sure I have any one particular one time-wise that's appropriate right this minute. But if you want to continue this at some point, it was interesting stuff to me. Back to you, sir.
Thank you, Howard. You know, in writing my portion of the history edition, I tried not to put any more than I had to. I didn't want it to be about me. But this process with the implants for me took almost a year from the time I lost the teeth to the time the crowns were cemented. I had the T33D expedition where I was out of the country for a month on Tarawa and Bonava Island in Fiji, taking care of that. So I had a lot going on at the time. I did not have anything other than the implants replaced. But after the extractions were done, artificial bone was also placed, and we put the different kind of bone grafts on another page. I think the following page 5. In this particular case, it was a synthetic bone. It was alloplastic bone. And the implant, then once the site was mature enough, the implant was then placed in, and that took healing time after that before we get integration. So implants were often titanium, as mentioned from Brandemark, one of the links. It was first noticed by a orthopedist as he was using screws in his research, and he could not retrieve them because they were osseointegrated. And since then, they've also found that coating the surface with titanium can increase the relation. There's physiological differences with quality of bone in different areas of the mouth. These lower back areas are very successful, and they're good choices. You don't have to deal with sinuses, etc., for general dentists to do. So let me go ahead and move down the list to N3IM. Okay, Keith N3IM, are you still with us? I know we're well past the top of the hour here. Over. Okay, N5RTF Chip, do you have any follow-up questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, Jay, this is a wonderful presentation. It is recording, and I will post it to the archive. I hope a lot of people will come and listen to it. We'll have to encourage them tomorrow at Grand Rounds because it's really no effort at all to listen to digital net. I noticed that there's really nobody tuned in to the stream today, which is also a shame. But no, this is fantastic, and I learned a lot, and I'm as always just amazed at what can be done. N5RTF.
Well, thank you very much, Chip. And tomorrow, of course, with Jack, KT4IZ, who's next on the list here, speaking on the science. Perhaps tonight I'll get an email out to the list for people to listen to this as a prelude for tomorrow. But the participation will be much higher tomorrow, and hopefully they'll be able to use some of the email and NetLogger submit questions. And I haven't received any in advance to answer, so we were hoping to get questions in advance. Maybe we can stimulate some of that by distributing your recording tonight. Thank you for doing that, Jeff, and thank you for being here. Jack, 84IZ, go ahead. Yeah, A4FL, 84, and it said, Jay, your presentation about the implant brings up something that allows us to circle back to the ethics issue, and something of concern to me as a periodontist. When do you decide that a tooth is hopeless? If you've put a lot of energy and education time and invested in implant materials and equipment for your office, including all the x-ray technology, including a bunch of stuff we haven't talked about, you are driven to look towards that. And if you know in your heart of hearts that a reasonable periodontal solution can be had without losing a tooth, what's the draw point? I mean, in your case, it was very obvious that the tooth was severely damaged. The crack extended through and into the pulpal region, and that meant that tooth had a very low likelihood of survival. It had Yeah, fantastic point from a very honest Jack. Thank you very much. So, well, natural tooth, obviously, you have normal nerve proprioception. When you chew, you get the feeling you know the tooth is there. Still a different feel than an implant. Implants are a good option when the tooth can't be saved. In my particular case, it was two molars, both my 12-year molars, about a month apart cracked, and neither of them were restorable. So it wasn't a matter of the periodontics or the endodontics specialty care. My problem was that the crack went all the way down through the bone into the cradle between the roots, so the restorability did not exist, and that's why the implants were necessitated. And Jack, also, from an endodontic standpoint, people that are doing root canals, so a general dentist refers to an endodontist. The endodontist has to look at that tooth in today's day, and they have to determine the probability of success of treatment. Front teeth have a much higher rate of success with non-surgical endodontics. The further back you get in the mouth with multiple roots, variations of anatomy, tortuous roots, curved roots, twisted roots, ones that don't, systems within the roots that don't, root canals don't go all the way through. There's all kinds of factors that affect success. When do you make the decision to send them back to the general dentist and say implant's a better option? What about patient finances? How does that impact? If you have somebody borrowing $5,000 or $10,000 for treatment that has a low probability of success, it's complicated, very complicated, and I'm sure we'll continue that conversation from a scientific standpoint of what's possible today tomorrow with those practical considerations in mind. Do you want to make any follow-up comments about that, Jack, before we move on to Andy? No, I'll leave it alone for the moment. It is an issue, and we want to do the best we can for a patient, and sometimes our clinical judgment is affected unwittingly by the ability to do certain things. And I think, those are the ethical arguments you have to run through your mind for every single case. I was either I was in an unusual position. I was practicing in an academic setting, so I didn't have a lot of the external stressors uh, on those questions. You know, we did have limits. There were things we did do and didn't do. So our availability of equipment, the availability of other specialists who we could turn to ask a question, we're all there. You know, we had a guy who's out in private practice, doesn't necessarily have a network that is close at hand and can answer those questions, people with high levels of expertise. So, yeah, going back and forth, you know, about those sort of things in your own mind and making a decision for the patient to the patient's benefit, not yours, is really tough. It's really tough. So, a good ethical quandary to think through. I'll go ahead and hand it back to you, and you can go ahead and move on down the line because I think we've got several folks back in here. It looks like Sir Sindhu was able to connect back up. Please, Horizon. Yes, thank you, Jack. Sir Sindhu does post his considerations of access to technology depending upon cost of treatment versus affordability of the public, availability of facilities, awareness about the public, and availability of insurance. So the same issues in India as we're talking about here. Thank you for Sir Sindhu. Yeah, one thing that was happening in the early part of when I was involved in organized dentistry, in the industry there was a philosophy that everything was a patient's individual choice, and they should be given the opportunity for the highest treatment plan possible. Uh, there really wasn't a lot of consideration of secondary, tertiary, and quaternary treatment plans. I was in a small town in an area that tends to be a little depressed and was more practical, but you don't want to necessarily diagnose the pocketbook or the wallet. But on the other hand, you're going to come after somebody with a $50,000 treatment plan when they're lucky if they can afford 250. I say the $250 because statistically in the past it's been talking about the average American, and I believe 50% of people or 25% of people for emergency can come up with $250 without trouble. The other 25% might be able to borrow it from family. Some of them have to borrow it, and then there was, you know, a lot of the population that couldn't come up with $250 of disposable income to spend on an emergency. So those problems are the same in medicine as they are in dentistry. And that philosophy that said, well, they can borrow the money isn't necessarily practical. In the age of cell phones and cars where people own $1,200 phones, smartphones, they say it's a personal choice. Let me let it drop one. You know, to an extent, there may be some truth in that, but on the other hand, not everybody has dental problems because of their personal choices or genetic factors, or sure, there's environmental factors, home care, but we also know that mineralization and the ability to keep teeth enamel intact can be affected by things as simple as physiology and pH. That we don't get new calcification within recalcified teeth unless we're in certain parameters. Even when you apply fluoride, pH is a factor. There's other reasons to go into the science of it. Perhaps Jack can bring some of that up tomorrow. But again, these are all factors. Life is complicated. It's important not to prejudge people, but I understand that one has to be practical too. Next on the list, WJAB. Andy, go ahead.
Yeah, well, some of the other questions you bring up in terms of medical practice, I'll use an example. My primary field was general internal medicine, and of course, most of the medical specialties are based on that. People who do cardiology, gastroenterology, immunology, infectious disease, rheumatology, etc. Generally are
finish a full internal medicine rotation certification, then go on to do anywhere from a 2 to 4 year uh, um, fellowship to become in their practice. But when we had, as a primary care office, internal medicine to refer, in the old days, I could get a hold of one of the specialists, and if I had something that needed to be sent, taken care of right away, they said, okay, we'll do that. And as time went on, um, when these practices became assimilated by hospital systems or large corporate groups or whatever, it was not necessarily that way anymore. It didn't change too much on the non-procedurally oriented internal medicine specialties, and those are things like infectious disease and rheumatology, etc. But when it came to the procedurally oriented ones like gastroenterology, cardiology, some would say pulmonology, you would call for that appointment and you'd be made for a consultation. You would have to wait anywhere from 2 to 6 months to get that appointment. And that was regardless of what you said or the physician said. Yeah, if you needed a procedure done, if you needed an upper or lower scope of the intestinal tract or a heart cath or a stress test or any other well-paid procedure, they could get you in 3 days. So it brings up that same ethical question that you just talked about in dentistry. And it is an issue when everybody is working for a large group that is more concerned with units of income than anything else. So I'll give that to you, Jack, and take it from there from WKAP.
Okay, thank you very much for the corollary there with medicine. And Jack will be with us tomorrow, KD4IZ. He had to sign off well past our hour here, although we have time to have this discussion. From a private practice standpoint of a small town practitioner in a depressed area, I can tell you I was able to handle the stress personally because I was involved in organized dentistry and I had friends and I had support systems. But in the local area, I was still respected, even though people couldn't afford me quite often. But there's a certain amount of concern, and I wouldn't say shame because it's not my fault, but 90% of the people in the food stores you walk through in the grocery store, the local one in the same town you practice, can't afford your treatment. And even if I reduced my fees by 50 or 75%, they still couldn't afford an ideal treatment. That could be a big source of stress. But you just do the best you can, and you treat everyone with respect, and you try to find solutions. As far as dealing with the painkiller, I always saw myself as somebody who got them out of pain, not created pain. That was my personal approach to my sanity, I guess. But I think it was to a great point was actually true. I got them out of pain. I do a lot of dental surgery for people, even though I wasn't a dental surgeon, as I did in T33A expedition, donated my time to help the locals. So they could get landing rights for the expedition on the island. They requested somebody come and do dentistry. Next on the list, N4TSC. Go ahead, Jerry.
Okay, thank you, Jay. I just wonder whether my understanding of what the situation was with dentistry was accurate. It's evolving now because as I asked the question, how do the dental schools match up with the projected needs? I thought, just looking at things from the standpoint of what I had learned anecdotally, I thought maybe there was a glut of dentists that were around, but I think maybe I need to revise my understanding. And based on what I recall from friends and acquaintances of mine that are in the dental field, I thought that they were focusing on the business side of dentistry rather than the technical side. But I think that that's probably based on distribution. And I think maybe what has to be addressed is what kind of distribution do you have of dentists in rural areas versus urban areas, and how do you address the level of dental care that you can give? I suppose you could go back to the old days. If it was a problem with the tooth, they would just extract it, and that would be the end of the discussion. But now, with all the technology that we have, the costs are higher. And the other thing that I'm aware of is as the dentists are in practice and um, developing their practice, they sometimes want to move, and the cost of moving was astronomical because just the plumbing and the other issues made it an impediment for them to try to change. So I don't know, maybe this is the kind of thing that needs to be looked at, and maybe there should be a supplement of some kind to support the people in rural areas as opposed to the more well-to-do areas. Anyway, that's just my evolving thoughts based on the discussion that we've had this morning. Back to you, Jacob. AA4FL and 4TSC.
Thank you, Jerry. And as many of you know, Jerry and I are both here in Florida. So we have a state environment here that's a little different. It's not uniform across the country. But back in the 1970s, I believe there was a shortage developing, and the government had funding, or 60s anyway, for dental schools to be funded and built, which dried up as the need was met, and there were adequate numbers of dentists. So it does change from generation to generation. So the financial support from the U.S. government, loan payback positions, and other funding is not there. From the state of Florida standpoint, the first dental school wasn't here in Florida until 1972 when UF opened. And the University of Florida was the only dental school for quite a while. Until then, they had arrangements with Emory and the Medical College of Virginia to take so many Florida residents per year. The Florida Dental School, when it started, what they tried to do was balance different demographics, different areas of the state. There were 67 dentists in my class. Only so many came from South Florida. It might be, like 10, Panhandle, Orlando, Jacksonville, that type. Also different backgrounds, different undergraduate schools. So it was a little complicated, but yet it worked. And but things change over time. Let me let it drop one. We talked in the ether about dental education and how it's affected by all the technology. I mean, one of the points in the ether, I think on page 2, was how much more dental students have to master now because of all the technologies and the sciences. Of course, it's not just an art anymore, but yet they have to know the art of it as well. So yes, it gets it's hard as an educator, and I'm not speaking as somebody that's a full-time educator, but just the observations, as I am part-time at the dental school in a volunteer capacity, and at work teaching dental students. It's very difficult for accreditation, have to serve your dental students, be a business, be successful, have enough money to cover the cost of education, but the students' tuition getting crazy is a very complicated situation. I wouldn't want to be the dean of a dental school. And the half knowledge of information these days, because of technology, means that they're constantly having to redo their training and make sure that everything's appropriate for the dentist to meet the needs. But again, that's a lot of counties in Florida don't have a dentist. There's quite a few in the Panhandle. Not one dentist in the entire county. I think with that, I'm going to let Merrill make some comments before we call the net to a close. WW6AA, go ahead, Merrill.
4SLWW6AA. Jay, it's very enjoyable listening to the conversation. The thing you did not cover is recently I had some dental work done, and what I observed is they had two x-ray rooms. One was the traditional one, where the person leaves the room and presses the button, they cover you with a shield and everything. And then the other time is after the dentist did some work and wanted to take a quick look, someone came in with a little hand device, hit a button, and the tooth appeared on the computer screen in front of me. I want to know about the differences between the two techniques. And the other one is listening to the conversation. My only comment is morality in the country at this moment in time is probably the lowest I've ever seen. And I can't wait until instead of talking about the issue peripherally where the group starts discussing morality. Back to you, Jay. AA4FLWW6AA. Bye.
Oh, thank you, Merrill. I never had a portable handheld X-ray unit, but obviously it would be more flexible if we had one and a wireless sensor to receive those X-rays that things are popped up on the screen. I know those products exist. I always had fixed units in every room. Of course, we also had lead in the walls, and for our full mouth ones, we did as well. In addition, distance is also a function of scatter radiation and such. The patients not be exposed, and thyroids were covered, et cetera, et cetera. As far as morals, I don't know if we're talking about ethics or morals. If we're talking about business ethics, it's not limited to dentistry. We do live in a country where profit seems to be king often in disregard to how we get there and the people that it harms along the way. You can evaluate that in terms of society. You read about it every day, stock market fluctuations. It's not limited to any one profession or aspect of business. And, we've had a pandemic to deal with in addition to. So there are good people out there in all professions. And there are also people that are going to abuse the public and be inappropriate. And what can you do in society? I mean, we live in a free society. You're free to make your choice as long as you stay by the letter of the law. So what's moral, ethical, and what's considered acceptable in business is a whole other issue that, of course, we can talk about in the context of our professions. Thank you for everyone that's been here today. It's already an hour and 45 minutes, and we'll circulate the recording for those that are not here to listen with us. Are there any follow-up comments before I call the net to a close? Is it AA4FL? Thank you for everyone that joined us and stayed with us through the long conversation. We'll make that recording available, and I hope everyone will join us for the ground rounds tomorrow. I'll be at control. In fact, we'll be doing the moderation of the topic, presenting the topic. KD4IZ Jack is a researcher and a very honest by training and has worked in industry, and he's a wise source of information. And it will be exciting tomorrow because we'll have a very big group. We'll be trying some different technologies to manage the flow of information so that everybody gets their questions answered. And I hope everybody enjoyed today, and we'll continue next week. Howard will be moderating the discussion again on as we get into next week, looking at the stress on professionals due to the pandemic and their mental health issues. So until next week, 7-3 AA4SL saying thank you to Quantum Ray for the use of technology. And we'll see everybody next week, calling the net to a close and releasing this for general amateur use. The quantum array frequencies and such. 730 AA4FL will be standing by, but otherwise we'll QRT. Is there anyone monitoring here at the Quantum Array that heard the conversation and would like to ask informally some questions of me? This is AA4FLJ.
Alpha Alpha 4 Foxtrot Lima, this is VU3 Whiskey Tango Japan. I was monitoring the whole conversation throughout the time. Microphone back to you, Alpha Alpha 4 Foxtrot Lima, this is VU3 Whiskey Tango Japan, over.
Oh, thank you, Sir Sendo. I know it's approaching 11 o'clock in the evening there. Thank you for participating. I had called on you earlier, and a couple of times you must have stepped away from the mic for a short period of time. I did receive your comments, and you probably heard me distribute them to the net. I appreciate your input that you submitted on NetLogger. Thank you. Tomorrow we're going to have the same thing on 20 meters, which of course you'll be able to listen to the streaming, but you won't have propagation directly involved. You can submit questions. We'll be doing NetLogger. If you want to listen and submit comments, I can repeat those comments for you. Over.
Sector Alpha Full Foster Team. This is View 3 Whiskey Tango Japan returning. Actually, I posted it for my dinner, but sometime that's why I was unable to answer. The discussion is very good and it is quite informative. And the factors that we are facing day to day in clinical practice that varies from country to country, and the factor we are facing here that I already mentioned in the comment box. So thing is the advanced technology is there and that is already enhancing our treatment capability and all, but cost of treatment and affordability of the public, availability of facilities, awareness among public, and availability of insurance. These four factors are very important whenever we are thinking about the high technology based dental practice over.
Well, we appreciate the input that you're giving, and I was able to repeat that, and I think we covered the points that you made. And if you're available tomorrow, that would be wonderful. It's an hour later, and then you can use the marcoaudio.net live stream to listen in, as the propagation will not favor India. If you're available, I'd be more than happy to pass along again your comments. Jack will also be monitoring that longer, the person that will be moderating the discussion tomorrow. So, Zendo, thanks again. Go ahead.
Roger, sure. I will try to get available at that time. Really very nice opportunity for me. Thank you so much, Alpha for Foxtrot team over.
Thank you, Sir Cinder. Thank you once again for always being here, being supportive, and a part of Marco. If you would distribute the audio recording to other medical hands in India, that would be wonderful. I'll send it on the Google listserv, and if you can just forward it to other organizations that might benefit from it, that and the link to the ether as well, which will be in that Google listserv tonight post. If you could distribute it, that would be wonderful as well. 7 3
Thank you so much, Alpha for Foxtrot Lemon View 3 Whiskey Tango Japan returning. Yes, surely, and some of my friends are very interested about Marco, but unfortunately they are not amateur radio operators. They don't have radio licenses. So, is there any provision to get membership of Marco still not being the amateur radio operator? Because they are very interested about our discussions, about our topics, and they want to know much more and they want to get involved in the discussions. So, is there any provision? So, please let me know if there is any provision, so I can inform to my friends over.
Probably the best mode for discussion would be either the Facebook group, if they can do Facebook, they can ask questions if they look for the Medical Amateur Radio Council, and if they're hands, I can certainly join them up. Or if they're physicians that are interested, for even though they're not hands, I can also add them So have them look for the Medical Amateur Radio Council Facebook group, and that might be the best way. If they want to join Marco, of course, we can use the Google group for questions too. Is Facebook a good option for your group of friends? VU3WTJ AA4FL.
Yes, sir. Yes, Facebook group is a good option for my friends, those who don't have amateur radio license with them. And two or three of my friends have their amateur radio license with them. I will definitely suggest them to join the group. I already told them, and they are very keen to join the group. So I will share the audios with all of my friends, and I will tell them to join the Marco in future. Over.
That is fine, Sir Sendo, and joining the Facebook group would be a good solution, even if they're not hams. I usually have Marco members and hams join, but I'll be looking for people from India. We could use the input, and they would bring value to the discussions that occur. And I do moderate the posts, so I would preview the questions before they're actually posted to the Facebook group. But just look for Medical Amateur Radio Council, Marco Medical Amateur Radio Council Facebook group, and I can have them put a request to join, and I will personally attend to their request. Thanks again, Mr. Sendo. VU3WTJ AA4SL.
Usual, thank you so much, Alpha Alpha for Foxtrot Lima. This is DU3 who is getting or Japan returning. Yes, there is another option. You can create one LinkedIn group also, which is completely professional because we are discussing here matters related to our professional things. So, LinkedIn can be another option because in many part of army in our country Facebook use is banned for some reason. So LinkedIn can be another option if it is possible. Otherwise, Facebook can work also. So anyway, it is a very nice discussion today, and hope by next week another interesting topic will come up, and I will able to join the discussion in future. Microphone back to you, Alpha Alpha for Foxtrot Lima. This is VU3 Whiskey Tango Japan for finals over.
Well, thank you, Sir Sendo. And perhaps your group of friends next week would find the topic to be useful, and that is stress from the mental health, how they're keeping their health in the age of the pandemic, how much stress it's creating for the providers of medicine and dentistry, and that will be the discussion. What are the long-term impact? Are people going to leave the profession? Are they going to get so frustrated? How are they dealing with the stress personally? That will all be discussed next week. So I hope you'll distribute that information and invite them to participate through the live stream. They can listen to the live stream in real time next week at 1500 UTC. They don't have to be a ham at marcoaudio.net. He's got the live stream up and running. QSL?
QSL is a very wonderful option. I will definitely tell my friends to listen the conversation over there over.
Thank you, Sir Sendo. With that, I'm going to say 7-3 and let you get some sleep. It's already right about the top of the 11 o'clock hour there. Thank you for hanging in there with us, and I'll let you stay up. That's past my bedtime. 7-3, Sir Sendo. Talk to you next week. AA4FL. I'll still be here on frequency for a moment or two if there's anybody else that wanted to talk to me before I go QRT.
Yes, 73. Bye bye. Have a good day.
And no one else heard calling AA for FL. I am going to say 7-3 until QRT, and I look forward to those that are listening that are 14.342 tomorrow at 1600 UTC. The Grand Rounds of the Air will continue the discussion that we had here today on the Marco Digital Voice Net. 7-3, I'll talk to you tomorrow. AA for FL clear and QRT.
Yeah, AA4FL and 4TSE. Are you available for a quick opinion, Jay, and 4TSE?
Oh, I'm still here, Terry, 10-4TSE. Give me just a moment to step away. I'll be back in just 1 minute. N4TSE, AA4FL. Go ahead, Jerry.
Yeah, AA4FL and 4TSE. Given that I suspect that people who commit suicide are at a point where um, they have pain that is unresolvable, I just wonder whether, in your opinion, whether the level of suicides that had been noted in dentistry were possibly due to financial pressures or technical pressures. I just wonder what your opinion is about that. AA4FL and 4TS.
I guess that would really change with each individual person when we're talking about it over time. I can't speak to today, but next week we're going to have the discussion in terms of mental health of individuals as due to pandemic and the long-term concerns. So that would be very appropriate for discussion next week during, and you might want to forward some of that to Howard and I or Mal or post it on the Google group because taking questions in advance through the Google group is a better way to manage the conversation. So if you want to frame it, say as next week as we talk about the topic on the Marco DVNet, this is a question or an area I would like to discuss, and we come prepared. We certainly can get more input from those people that monitor the Google group and more interest. How's that sound, Jerry? N4TSC, AA4FL.
Yeah, okay, Jay. It's just a question that I'm just trying to reconcile my understanding of people that I knew in dentistry and what their attitude was, and the fact that there's a person that I knew very well in high school, and just trying to give an answer, trying to satisfy what direction it came from. Wondered what your opinion is, and I suppose a lot of this has to do with attitudes that we had growing up and attitudes probably change. Anecdotally, I can tell you that it may sound like a joke, but this actually happened. My grandmother, who didn't speak English very well, um, was told that her grandson was going to be a doctor, and she came back with the question very innocently: a doctor, or a doctor, a dentist? That may actually reflect the changes of society. Anyway, okay, we'll let you go. Thank you very much for the discussion, and I'm glad eventually I got this hotspot to work. I don't know whether it'll be consistent going forward, but finally got the thing working today. Back to you. AA4FL N4TSE 73.
Yes, Jerry, and actually you sound fantastic now. No problem at all. Some of the cleanest communication that I've received today. Everything sounds appropriately crisp. Audio is wonderful. Signal's great. And hearing your voice is great. Thank you for participating. As far as the individual friend, uh, remember dentistry was a cottage industry. And I mean, you could go to a dental society, as they called them back then. We have so many better support points. People are getting email contacts all day long, manufacturers, fellow practitioners. I'm sure the same is true in medicine. No one's on an island anymore like they used to be. Being on an island can be very stressful. We'll talk more about it next week. I'm going to go QRT 7-3, Jerry. AFS, I'll be clear.
7-3J, stay safe. N4TSE clear. N4 UED.